The Nine, a Myth for Modern Times, written by Bomi Huron, read by the author. Let us begin with the Muses. When they sing for the Father's use, they deeply thrill the great mind of Olympus, telling of things that are, that will be, and that were before, blending their voices, and the weariless sound flows sweet from their lips, and spreads like lilies. They were born to be the forgetting of troubles, the ceasing of worries. For 9 nights resourceful Zeus lay coupled with memory in love, entering her sacred bed far removed from the other immortals. She bore 9 daughters, all of one mind, with song in their breasts, with hearts that never failed, not far distant from the topmost peak of snow-capped Olympus. There they have their bright dancing places, their fine halls, and the Graces and Desire have their houses nearby, and all is in bloom. And they move in the dance, intoning the careful ways of the gods, celebrating the customs of all the immortals, as they send forth a lovely voice. Hesiod, Theogony, lines 37 to 68. Prologos. Thespiae, Greece, 392 CE. Day broke over the valley, a misty morning with promises of a balmy afternoon to come. Across the lush green fields nestled cozily at the base of looming Mount Helicon, flocks of sheep bleated in blissful ignorance, grazing away beneath the watchful eyes of their faithful herders, stoically guarded by one lonely abandoned stone tower up the mountain side. The square tower, already a millennium old, was all that remained of Askra, hometown of the poet Hesiod. Down the center of the valley, along the Permessos River, lay a few other low stone structures and a handful of barely recognizable ruins, scattered haphazardly about. Otherwise, the peace remained undisturbed for miles around. Even the distant sounds of the waking city of Thespiae to the east were barely audible over the plain. If ever there was a location, a moment in time, to define the pastoral idyll, this could certainly have been the place. It could have been, but it wasn't. In the silence of that pastoral sunrise, a group of young women emerged from the mist, seeming to quite literally manifest from the haze, as though they themselves had been made of nothing more than water and light. All wore draping chitons which hung to their ankles, girdled by cords at the waist, a fashion of dress which had fallen out of favor some 400 years or so prior. As their hems shifted, you might have seen their feet protected from the rocky terrain by gilded sandals or boots, their shapely calves all adorned by intricately lacing straps. Their thick tresses were tied up in bands or braids, some bearing topknots, others allowing radiant curls to fall down their necks. Most remarkably of all, though, many carried with them antiquated musical instruments, kitherae and auloi, while 2 others bore what had to have been dramatic masks. If the sleepy-eyed shepherds on the plain had bothered to notice the appearance of these fantastic females, they might have, at first, thought them an overdressed troupe of traveling performers, or at the very least a group of wealthy eccentrics out from Thebes on a rural holiday. Though if the shepherds had been able to see the women at all, they would have noticed other more important details. The women's tired eyes, their loose hair ties, their singed garments, and the layers of fine dust which had settled over them from head to toe, leaving them sorely in need of a bath. As things were, however, this incredible group of women, these 9, trudged across the valley, drawing glances only from some of the sheep, who paused in their grazing to look up at them. The women returning their kindly glances with sad smiles and reassuring strokes to the sheep's fleeces or gentle pats on the head. As one, they crossed the plain, following the river upstream past the forgotten square tower on the cliffside toward the base of Mount Helicon. Not a word was spoken, not a look shared among them. They had followed this route countless times before. They knew where they were heading, even if it meant more heartbreak. At the foot of the mountain, on the western edge of the valley, they could see the remains of an amphitheater, once vibrant, now crumbling. Closer by, near to the river's edge, a stoa of collapsing columns, creating an avenue which ended, quite confusingly, in a small Christian church, built largely of repurposed stone. It was one of 7 such small churches in the valley, and the locals called it the Agia Triada. though if anyone had bothered to ask one of the 9, they surely would have called it a mockery. Just outside the small church, a collective row of what might once have been called pedestals for a series of sculptures, though the artist pieces had clearly been stripped away some time ago, and the bases now more closely resembled worn-out boulders from weathering and neglect. Conveniently, there were 9 of these, and the 9, as if done from perfect rehearsal, quietly took a boulder each for herself and sat. There they stayed for some time, consumed by thought, oblivious to the idyllic environment around them. Finally, one began to seethe, her brow knitting, her teeth clenching, her breaths coming harder and faster. Abruptly she stood, taking up the precious scroll she carried with her, and hurling it against the columns of the stoa with a scream that set a flock of starlings foraging in the valley, flying off to the hills. The other 8 turned to look, snapped out of their own dismal reveries by the sudden outburst. "I can't take it any more," the first shrieked. Then, without provocation, she stalked over to the side of the small church and began to kick at its walls purposefully, violently, taking out her aggression on the unprepossessing little building. "Holy Heracleo," a second called after her. "What do you think you're doing?" "I didn't think she'd be the first one to snap," remarked a third. "Seriously," added a fourth, "if anyone, I thought it'd be Mel. She's the real drama queen. Right, Mel? Get it? Drama queen?" "Not funny, Talia," her target snipped. "Nothing ever is to you, Mel," another griped. "Isn't anybody going to stop her?" interjected the 7th. "She isn't hurting anyone," the 8th observed calmly. "She's hurting herself." The 9th stood quickly, whisking over to the aggravated Cleo, while remarking over her shoulders to the others, "Really, I'm ashamed of you all." "Take it easy, Cal," the 8th replied. "You sound like Mom." "Don't pick on her, Terp," the 3rd retorted. "Give me one reason why I shouldn't, Nia." "Stop it, you two," Talia shouted. "It was only a joke." "Calm, everyone," the 7th intervened. "Now is not the time to—" "It's a perfect time, Polly," the 6th rounded. "Get off that perfect baby sister tangent and wake up to what's happening." "For once I agree," the 2nd chimed in. "If she needs to vent—" "Oh, like you're one to talk, Era," Mel interrupted, jumping to her feet. "At least she doesn't choose to vent like you do." "And what's that supposed to mean, Mel?" Era tensed, also standing. "Which mortal's tunic have you had your hands up lately, huh?" Era turned a deep red, shouting back, "Why don't you tell that to your precious Sappho, Mel? You leave Sappho out of this. Ladies!" The 8 bickering women suddenly found themselves stopped in both their literal and proverbial tracks. They turned to see their eldest sister, Cal, staring back at them, with a look of utter disappointment written all over her dusty, singed, tear-stained face. She shook her head slowly in disbelief as she held Cleo close to her in a tight embrace, Cleo quietly sobbing. The bleating of the sheep in the valley and the steady trickle of the river nearby brought them all back to the present, filled with tension as it may be. "This has been a devastating blow to us all," Cal admonished, "and need I remind you, not the first of its kind these past few centuries. But one thing I'm certain of now, more than ever, things will not and cannot get better if we're at one another's throats like snarling animals." "Tell that to the humans," the 6th retorted, crossing her arms defiantly. "You Terpy," Cal began. "Now is not the time." "Then when?" Eyes red, Cleo pushed away from Cal, wiping her face clean on her short sleeve. "The Serapeon is gone, Cal. The most beautiful building in all the world, and with it all that was left of the library. All gone!" "That doesn't spell the end of things, Cleo, doesn't it?" Cleo took a few steps away and gestured obscenely to the small church she had been attacking moments before. This was once our home." "No, dear, our home is on Olympus, and there's no one left up there," Cleo screeched back with a maniacal laugh-sob. "Daddy saw what was going on. He knew what was about to happen. That's why he took Mom and the Graces and the whole damn family off to who knows where for a safe retirement. But you," Cleo stabbed the air with her finger, advancing on Cal, "you convinced us to stick around. You said the humans were still invoking us, that they needed us." "Was I wrong?" Cal replied in as even as a tone as she could muster, putting on a brave face. "What about Suetonius? Or Apuleius?" Suetonius wrote court gossip, Cleo snipped back, and Apuleius had that bitch Isis to thank. For crap's sake, Cal, he bypassed the invocation altogether. And besides, they are history. I dare you to name just one person in the last half-century who's actually needed us. Era leaned over to Talia, whispering, "She's got a point." Talia simply nodded, eyebrows raised in surprise agreement. Cal stood, mouth agape, visibly deflating before the other's eyes. "We lost the library itself a century ago," Cleo ranted on, tears trickling down her cheeks despite the maddening grin plastered on her face. "The library and the museum. And you know why we lost it? Politics, Cal. Petty human squabbles over power and money. Then yesterday—" She heaved a sob of pain and remorse. Yesterday, Polly continued in Cleo's stead, still calmly seated atop her pedestal in meditation, a group of paramilitaristic zealots tore into the Serapeum, where the remains of the library existed, and burned them all, deeming the collected unread scrolls all to be heretical and demoniac. Then they destroyed the temple, Mel added with a forlorn sigh, and publicly mutilated the altar, Terp grimaced, her eyes glistening. Soon another church to the new religion will be built on its ruins, Nia glumly concluded. We don't know that, Nia, Euterpe counterpointed, but Nia shot her a knowing look, pointing to the heavens. Euterpe hung her head. Shit. So yeah, you're right, Cal, Cleo said, steeling herself against any further outbursts. This was our home, and look what's left of it. That eatable knockoff Constantine ripped up our statues for some cute little interior design project of his own, then tore down our temple and literally had one of his precious churches built on top of it out of our temple stones. She threw her arms up in the air with exasperation. Please excuse me if I'm not seeing the wine goblet as half full right about now. Cal, Calliope, muse of eloquence, was in that moment rendered speechless. She dove into her memories, tore through her conscience, searching for something, anything to provide a rebuttal, a word of reassurance to her justifiably distraught little sister. But nothing in her arsenal surfaced to allay her sister's fears. Not a single thing. Calliope suddenly felt like Pandora had all those thousands of years ago, when the evils of the world had accidentally been released and only hope was left inside the storage jar to cling to. What if, she hazarded to consider, just maybe, this time, hope wasn't enough? Calliope turned to the others, reading their expressions loud and clear, but still she felt compelled to ask, so ask she did. Do you all feel the same way? A chorus of 8 heavenly voices, each one tinged with sorrow and care, replied in unison, Yes. Calliope took a long moment to process their response, then sighed, nodding. It's 8 against 1, I see. Terp came forward, taking her sister's hand. We're not against you, Cal. We were never against you, and we never will be. But I can't make you stay, not if you all feel that way. Era tugged awkwardly at a long curl. So what do we do now? Mel draped an arm over Era's shoulders. It's a big world out there, sis. Talia's expression turned sourly sober. That's not at all funny. Mel grinned back, pulling her close until their foreheads touched in a gesture of affection. I didn't say it was. Polly stood at last, and took Terp's hand, guiding her back to the group. Even though she was the youngest of the 9, Polyhymnia rarely spoke unless she had something of great importance to say. Is it not obvious, she began with a sympathetic smile, it is time we left the realm of inspiration and pursued the realm of action? Euterpe's face drooped. You mean, make the music alone? Polyhymnia's eyes twinkled. Of course. We have always made music, but there must come a time when each of us takes the solo. No! Calliope rushed to her sister's sides. No! We've always made the music as one. That is our very definition, our very reason for being. And look how far that's gotten us, Cal. Cleo sauntered up wearing a cynical smile, her tears erased, completing the circle of 9. It's time we showed this mortal world what possibility really looks like. I mean, if we're supposed to be the divine inspiration for these funny little ape men made of clay, then why can't we be the band leaders too, and on their own terms? Terp suddenly brightened, an encouraging twinkle in her eye. "Yeah, why can't we?" Calliope sagged. "So, is that it then? No more 9? Come on, sis," Era soothed, rubbing Calliope's back in a gentle circular motion. "We've always had our own things. Now we can each be the specialists in our fields. We wouldn't have to travel as a set anymore. And it's not like we wouldn't still be inspiring," Nia added. "We can still do what we do and find time to give back to the world." Calliope tried to smile. Yeah, I suppose that's true." Polyhymnia reached out, entwining her arm with Calliope's. "You know it is. Remember what our glorious teacher Apollo hath taught, that the chord is never as sweet when the individual notes have all become diminished." Talia groaned. "All right, Oracle, that's enough metaphor." "Well, there's one thing I certainly won't miss," Mel sighed. Terp punched Mel's arm. "Leave Polly alone." "Oh, no, I wasn't referring to what she said." The sun was climbing higher in the sky, the mist having long since dissipated. Calliope sat on her pedestal, having watched 7 of her sisters scatter to the wind off to the 4 corners of the world. Only she and Nia, Urania, muse of astronomy, remained behind. Polyhymnia might have always been the spiritual rock of their family, but Calliope and Urania shared something else in common. They were the grounded ones. Even with her head in the clouds, Urania knew how to read the stars just as well as she could study them. The two had spent many a late night up in the last millennium, comparing notes, perfecting interpretations, charting courses. Urania stared up at the sun's position, then looked back at Calliope. "It's time." "Where do you plan on going, Nia?" "Honestly, I don't know. I've spent so long in the heavens, I thought perhaps it might be a good idea to see some more of Earth for a change." "I'm sure you'll have a wonderful time." Urania turned her eyes back to Calliope and knelt before her, taking her hands, biting her lip. "What? What is it?" "I had something I wanted to share with you, out of earshot of the others." Calliope gripped Urania's hands tighter. "Go on." "The 9 will return, as one." A shiver of joy coursed up and down Calliope's spine. "We will?" Urania squinched her eyes shut, thinking, then nodded definitively. "Yes." "When?" Urania's expression sagged, and her eyes reopened. "I don't know." "What about Mom and Dad? Will we ever see them again?" Urania shook her head. "The stars tell me many things, but you know the Olympians and their mysterious ways." "Don't I know it?" Calliope laughed, and Urania joined her, their joyous sound causing the river to glisten brighter, the birds to sing louder. "I'll miss you, Cal. I'll miss you, Nia. Remember, it won't be forever." Urania kissed her sister's cheek, then stood, brushing the grass stains from her knees. She backed away a few steps, their gazes locked. Then she turned, stretched one long, slender arm elegantly upward toward the sun, and was gone with a flare. Calliope found herself alone in the pastoral valley. Even the sheep had moved on to other pastures. Now it was just her, the tower, the river, and the ruins of their former Boeotian home. As she gazed sadly around her, the image of a little boy with a lyre flashed in her memory, a young Thracian prince with the voice of a muse. The tears softly began to fall again. Why am I always left alone, she wondered, but there was no one there to answer her. Nashville, Tennessee, 2022. Dr. Caroline Pinthos stepped out of the car, collecting her briefcase off the back seat, shutting the door behind her. She waved cheerfully to her Uber driver, who returned the wave with a warm smile before pulling out of the small parking loop and back onto 27th Avenue. The ride from her hotel downtown had been smooth and uneventful, with exemplary driving in rush-hour traffic, made the more delightful by her driver's stimulating conversation. He deserved the 5-star review and generous tip. Caroline took a cursory glance at her watch. Good, still ahead of schedule with time to spare, then began to take her bearings. She quickly spotted a walking trail through the greenery, adjacent to the parking loop and tracing the lake nearby. Perfect. Stick to the trail, she thought, and it should lead to one of the park's public restroom facilities, where she could freshen up before her meeting. Feeling particularly smart for having chosen the loafer flats and pantsuit this morning, Caroline turned her feet to the trail with an added spring in her step, taking in the breeze off the water, basking in the beautiful spring weather. As she rounded a bend by the water's edge, a beep in her ear alerted Caroline to an incoming WhatsApp call. She reached up, tapping an AirPod hidden beneath her jaw-length bob, and initiated the conversation without once breaking her purposeful stride. "Pinthos here." "Sanjay, good to hear from you. How's the new clinic doing?" "Terrific. And how's Faisal working out?" "Oh, that does my heart good. I told you, give that young man half a chance and he'd—" "What?" "No, it was your idea, Sanj. I was just lucky enough to convince the board not to be so stiff on the funding, so—" "Well, aren't you the sweetest? Doctors Without Borders is lucky to have you on board, too." "Yeah, I know it's been a beast of a battle, but I'm praying the Bangladeshi government will realize one of these days that—" "Oh, no, I can't. I'm sorry. Well, definitely not this week, anyway." "Yeah, I'm back in the States." "Nashville?" "Yes, Tennessee." "That email I got while I was up in Dhaka was from a rep at the Vanderbilt Medical Center, part of the research team. I'm supposed to meet up with her here in a little while." "No, I'm not entirely sure why, to be honest. Probably wants to try to get me on board as an adjunct, maybe set up some work experience for one of her honor list students, or—" Dr. Caroline Pinto suddenly found herself floored, all sense of reality evaporating around her. She stared up at the sight before her, so affected that she could feel the moisture in her mouth turn dry. A chill coursed through her body, and her hands began to tremble slightly as a tear escaped from the corner of her eye, tracing its path slowly down her cheek. The reaction was a brief one, but in that moment, time stopped. Her colleague's panicked tone in her ear brought her back. "Sorry, Sanj, what?" No, I'm fine, honestly. Hey, can I get back to you in a little while? Yeah, I need to do something." "Thanks." She reached up, tapping the earbud to end the call, then removed the device and put it in her pocket, her eyes fixed on what stood before her. The Parthenon. Well, a Parthenon, at least. Dr. Penthos was well aware that the real Parthenon, what was left of it anyway, still stood on the Acropolis Hill overlooking the city of Athens. But suddenly, here in the middle of midtown Nashville, Tennessee, there it was, down to the exact dimensions. A little less colorful than the original had been, perhaps, but otherwise, it was like it had never had its roof blown off 300 years ago, or its statuary stolen away by the British 200 years ago. It was beautiful. Her breezy stride having been replaced by a long-ago familiar kind of calm, Caroline felt herself hypnotically drawn off the green and across the small parking lot to one side of the building, compelled to make her way around to the front steps leading up to the unmistakable octastyle portico, never taking her eyes off this magnificent— "What the fuck are you doing here?" And for the second time in less than 10 minutes, Caroline was blasted back into the moment, this time by a tall, bosomy blonde in a form-fitting designer skirt, carrying an oversized Louis Vuitton handbag, wearing sunglasses to match. The woman slammed the door on her Audi and stalked quickly over to Caroline, balancing on gladiator heels in a way that would have made even a Barbie doll gasp with jealousy. "I'm sorry," Caroline blinked, thrown. "Have we met?" "Oh, hell no!" The woman threw her well-manicured hands in the air, tossing her curls, her head shaking in disbelief. "You did not just—" "Ma'am, please, calm down. Perhaps you have me mistaken for—" "Trust me, honey, there's no mistake." The glamorous stranger came to a stop, her face mere inches from Caroline's. She whipped off her $500 sunglasses with a gaze that bored holes into the doctor's surprised eyes. It took Caroline a moment to see it, but— "Oh my God," Caroline gasped. "I didn't recognize." She stretched out her arms, moving to embrace the other woman. The other took a step back, blocking her approach with a defensive gesture. "Don't touch me, you bitch!" Caroline's face paled. "What? Where's this coming from?" I don't know. Let me think. Try Harlem, 1927, the Cotton Club?" "The Cotton Club?" Caroline looked confused. "Now, hold on a minute. Or how about San Francisco, 1967? I didn't have anything to do with— "Oh, you didn't, huh? Fine. Then let's jump to Newark, 1997. Allen Ginsberg's funeral. Remember that?" "Of course I do." Caroline's brow knitted with anger and frustration. "It was a beautiful service for a life that deserved to be— "Save the eulogy, Callie. It's too late." "What did I say now?" "It's what you said then," the blonde huffed, shifting her purse off her shoulder, clutching it by the straps with knuckles turning white. "What a waste." "Do you remember saying that? At the reception in front of Peter. The man had just lost his husband, for crap's sake, and he heard you." She barked a laugh lacking any humor. "What a waste." You think I meant... Oh, I know exactly what you meant, sis. You never liked him. That is not true. You never like anything I do, and I already know why, so you can save the rebuttal. It's 'cause it's never eloquent enough for you. Hey, don't go putting words into my mouth, Ira. Oh, I'm sorry. Putting words into someone else's mouth. Car keys jangled in her hand as she pointed a French-tipped finger menacingly at Caroline with a scowl. I thought that was our job. I mean, that has always been our literal job. I get that, and you are absolutely brilliant at what you do, but just because I don't know how to appreciate what... Cut the bullshit! The woman threw the car keys into her purse and donned her designer sunglasses again. I knew where you stood all those decades ago. I just wanted to make sure I could say that to your face the next time our paths crossed. She pulled out her phone, swiping the screen to check the time. We're done here. I have a meeting to get to anyway. Caroline blinked rapidly, like she'd just woken up. A meeting? The blonde scowled back at her. I'm a professional too, you know. I have a life. I have needs. I have goals. I never said you didn't. Yeah, well, you sure put me down often enough to prove otherwise. She shouldered her purse again, slipping the phone back into his side pocket. If you'll excuse me, big sister, I have things to do. Ira, wait. Caroline moved to stop the blonde in her tracks, but the woman had already hit the brakes less than a few feet away. What? What's wrong? Please talk to me, Ira. The glamorous woman's mouth slowly fell open in a most unglamorous manner as she raised one finger, pointing at someone or something off in the distance. After a few seconds of words failing, she whipped her violent gaze back at Caroline. Did you have something to do with this? What, you mean the Parthenon? No, I knew about the damn Parthenon, you idiot, she snapped. I meant her. Is this some kind of parent trap set up between you two? Caroline turned back to the direction in which the other was pointing. It took a little less time to recognize this one, but the shock was still genuine. A lovely young lady with wire-rimmed glasses, wavy brown hair piled up in a proper bun, and a ruffled blouse which gave off a distinctively librarian-esque vibe, was sauntering up the walking trail opposite them, a stack of books cradled in her arms, also clearly heading towards the Parthenon. As she came closer, she spotted the doctor and the blonde on the path, staring directly back at her, causing this professionally poised, clearly learned woman to stumble, spilling her books all over the concrete walkway. The aggravated supermodel wannabe looked back over her shoulder to the flabbergasted Doctor Without Borders. What the hell is going on here? Dr. Caroline Pinthos shook her head in bewilderment. I genuinely don't know.